Innovating Hope. Welcome, everyone. How are you doing? I'm Charles Ellison, and welcome to our HBCU Presidential Roundtable discussion entitled Innovating Hope, Maximizing HBCUs. We're going to be talking specifically about those 1890 land-grant HBCUs and state government partnerships. I'm Charles Ellison. I am normally host, executive producer of a daily public affairs program called Reality Check on WURD Radio, Word TV. And I am also with the 1890 Universities Foundation and a senior fellow with the council, our partner for this event, the Council of State Governments Eastern Regional Conference, Council on Communities of Color. Welcome, everyone. We're just letting everyone in the room, and we're going to get started with our panel very shortly. This is a recorded event, and it will be shared on multiple media platforms. So we just ask that everyone please turn their cameras off if you're not on panel, and to remain on mute as well. We really appreciate that. And we will probably have an opportunity towards the end of this discussion to have you ask questions in the chat feature here in this Zoom environment. Before we start our discussion, I want to give a real big thanks. First of all, I just want to give a happy 5th anniversary shout out to the 1890 Universities Foundation, which has been proudly representing the 1890 universities that are in 19 states. So definitely appreciate, I'm not an alum of an 1890 university, but in working with them, I've come to find out how very unique and special these institutions are. So it's my honor to lead this discussion today. And so I want to give a happy 5th anniversary shout out to the 1890 Universities Foundation. Also want to give a warm thanks to the Council on Communities of Color at the Council of State Governments Eastern Regional Conference, especially to its director, Debbie Ann Page, who is with us and has made this all possible. Also want to thank Rwanda Jenkins, Vice President at the 1890 Universities Foundation, as well as Dr. Mortimer Newfield, the President and CEO of the foundation. Use some insights as to what it is we're talking about, because we're going to be focusing on one major topic, has some controversy on it as well, and that is the historic and woeful underfunding of 1890 land-grant universities, land-grant institutions. So before we get our panel going, real quick, I just want to spend several minutes talking with Ellis Collier. He is the congressional fellow, the first congressional fellow actually ever for the 1890 Universities Foundation. He's been working very closely with House Agriculture Committee Chair Congressman David Scott out of Georgia. He has been working there actually very diligently and working on these issues at the House Agriculture Committee in Washington, D.C. Ellis, how are you doing?
Hey, did you use the link?
I'm good, Charles. How are you?
All right, excellent, excellent. So I really appreciate your time here. I do apologize, and I'm actually going to, as we just wanted to, as we're having this discussion, Ellis did ask you a few questions about this funding issue. So talk to us about, like, right now, what the state of federal funding is for 1890 federal land grant institutions. This is something you follow rather closely on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. And let me start by saying thank you, Charles, once again for talking about this issue. It's really important. To take a step back, just in general, USDA provides funding for land-grant universities through NIFA, National Institute of Food and Agriculture. They provide both competitive and non-competitive grants. And basically with this funding, there is a policy requirement that every dollar for dollar that is given to land-grant universities, both 1862s and 1890s, should also be matched by state legislatures. And commonly you hear this referred to as one-to-one matching. And as I say in the example, so if College A receives $1 million from NIFA through non-competitive, that's very important, non-competitive grant funding, then the state should also match that funding for $1 million. And overall, this has been a good deal for, from a policy standpoint. It was to encourage states to have a balanced funding for both 1862s and 1890s, but 1890s have dealt with the disparity. So as you'll see in the next slide, but really it's been the one-to-one matching issues, which is established since 97, has had a great disparity. For 1862s, they have mostly found the funding that they wanted, and 1890s have gotten the short end of the stick. So just as recently as 2 years ago, because FY21 isn't out yet, 9 of 19 1890 institutions did not receive their full match. And we saw numbers where in certain states, only half of the funding for 1890s was received, where 1862s, actually, there's a lot of states that received over 100% funding, 101 or 102%. So it's a dire issue that we need to be fixed.
And just to clarify, Ellis, too, this is federal law. Like, so states have to match those federal funds, correct?
Absolutely. But, it's the best comparison I could put is like Obamacare, for example. Essentially, there are states that have denied the Obamacare policy and they haven't received certain benefits from it. It's the same thing here. The federal government cannot force states to match funding, but it's really an encouragement that when you receive funding from NIFA or from the federal government in general, that all land-grant universities, the 1890s and 1862s, should receive the same funding, but that has not happened.
No, Ellis, thanks so much for the background. So that's going to offer us the type of information, the intelligence that we need to carry on this next discussion. So we've been talking with Ellis Collier. He is the Congressional Fellow for the 1890 Universities Foundation, joining us from Washington, D.C. or nearby. He works with the House Agriculture Committee. Ellis, thanks for your time. We'll be talking with you again.
No problem.
All right. Excellent. And so let's go ahead and start our discussion, our panel. I'm going to introduce the panelists. At some point, a little bit later on, I'll signal to the audience when there's an opportunity to ask questions in your Zoom chat feature. Once again, please keep your video cameras off and also keep yourselves on mute as we now start our discussion. And I'm going to, I think we do have, I think most folks are in. There may be some other folks who, some registrants, people who registered to participate will be streaming in. So let me go ahead and introduce the panelists. Dr. Paul Jones is president of Fort Valley State University in Georgia. He's also chairman of the 1890 Presidents Council, or the Council of 1890 University Presidents. He's joining us by Zoom. Also, State Representative Harold Love out of Tennessee, who represents a district that has an 1890 University, Tennessee State University, of which he is a graduate. He's joining us from Nashville, Tennessee. Senator Corey McCray is a state senator out of Maryland, and he represents a district in Baltimore. We do have an 1890 university in the state of Maryland, University of Maryland Eastern Shore, but he also represents the district of Morgan State University, another HBCU that is proudly represented by Senator McCray. Adam Harris is a writer for The Atlantic. He's also the author of a fantastic book you should read, we're reading, called The State Must Provide, and it is a history of these funding issues that have been faced by 1890 land-grant HBCUs. Fantastic book. We appreciate having Adam here today. So let's go ahead and kick off our panel. Dr. Jones, I'll start off with you to get your assessment. We've heard a lot about HBCUs in the news and the headlines lately. In fact, we're just getting another alert as of the taping of this panel that there was once again another HBCU that's dealing with a bomb threat. I believe it was Elizabeth State University, as you had mentioned, Adam, earlier on. But what is your assessment of the condition of HBCUs right now, particularly since you're a president of one? Dr. Jones, I think we have you on mute. There we go.
Thank you. My apologies. Do you think after 2 years of Zoom, we'd have this figured out, but not so much. First of all, thank you for having me here today. And when I think about the state of HBCUs, and quite frankly, I think we're in a very strong position today. There are some great things happening at our institutions. I think our whole ecosystem is doing remarkably well in spite of many of the challenges that we face. We are seeing surges in enrollment across the sector. We are seeing a kind of a rekindled, or certainly people wanting to invest in the brand, if you will. They beginning to understand the value and impact that these institutions are making on our country. And I think that again, in spite of these challenges, and I will say, I don't want to make light of what we have faced from the pandemic perspective, the dual pandemic perspective. But at the same time, we're doing remarkably well. But the pandemic has created some challenges, I think, for us as well, but it's also created some opportunities that we can certainly talk about. And so I think overall, I'll leave it there, just that we are doing very well, but we still have much work to do in our states, and increasingly more work even at the federal level. But certainly very pleased. The philanthropy has been probably at an all-time high for our institutions, and we're very grateful for that.
Adam, so struggles, challenges faced by HBCUs, especially these 1890 land grant institutions. This is nothing new. And as you're watching these, these series of bomb threats that have been that have been faced by HBCUs all over the country, and 1890 land grants included, that's not really surprising to you. It's especially not surprising to you considering the funding struggles that these colleges, that these institutions go through. So give us a little bit of sort of a brief overview of that history, if you can.
Yeah. So, one of the ways that I've often put it is that America has traditionally had a really antagonistic relationship towards Black education, right? Going back to 1740, when, South Carolina passed its first anti-literacy law, banning teaching an enslaved person to read and write, right? Several states followed suit where, you could be fined up to $500 for teaching a Black person to read in Alabama. But if you sort of fast forward into the 1860s, right, there was this, or 1850s, 1860s, there was this big push to expand education more broadly. And of course, expanding education more broadly meant primarily to white men at the time. And so you have the federal government passes the first Morrill Act. It gives states land which they can sell in order to fund these institutions for predominantly white men. Some institutions open their doors to white women as well. But in that gap, you have a sort of creation of some institutions that are serving Black students, institutions that are being created to teach teachers, institutions that are being created to teach folks the agricultural and mechanic arts. And you have a place like Alcorn State University in 1871 that's founded and given a guaranteed appropriation of $50,000 a year for a decade. But you also have this, as I mentioned, this sort of antagonistic force that's always pushing back against those institutions. So 4 years after Alcorn is founded, right, by 1875, that guaranteed appropriation is cut to $15,000 a year. A year later, it's cut to $5,500 a year. Meanwhile, a place like Ole Miss is actively saying that we would rather close than enroll a Black student. And so you start to see that resource divide developing. By the time you move forward to 1890, you have some of those predominantly white institutions saying, hey, thanks for that initial land grant, but it wasn't enough. We need more. So led by the president of Penn State University, they go back to the federal government, and the federal government says, hey, states, you guys, we'll give you more money, but you have to have institutions that serve Black students. You need to fund institutions that serve Black students. And so all of these institutions that had really grown up thanks to philanthropic dollars, thanks to religious organizations, thanks to the individual kind of agency of folks across these different states, become these vehicles that states are saying, okay, yes, we will allot some of our money to these institutions to serve these Black students. And it's actually, the last thing I'll say is just thinking about this sort of antagonistic relationship, thinking about where the institutions are now. Knowing that a place like Alabama State University was denied funding for an entire year by the state of Alabama, knowing that you had places in Tennessee, places in North Carolina, places in Georgia that were actively denied this funding, and yet were able to persevere through that, were able to make it to this point, are still educating 10% of Black students, 25% of Black STEM graduates, 50% of Black lawyers and doctors. They grow out of this sort of resilient legacy, but the thing about resilience is it's not something that you should have to develop. Resilience sort of comes out of struggle, and the institutions have been born out of that struggle, and they've thrived on the back end.
Yeah, thanks for that, Adam. So Representative Love, talk about the struggles you've been dealing with in Tennessee as a state legislature there in Nashville. And, what's that fight been like, to preserve the budgets of schools like Tennessee State University? Also, you have, if I'm not mistaken, you have several HBCUs in your district, including Tennessee State?
That's correct. I have Meharry Medical College, American Baptist College, and Fisk University also in my district. So I have four.
Wow.
In that 58th district in Nashville. To your point, and to much of what Adam has said, when you're looking at 1890 institutions like Tennessee State University, what we discovered was just looking at the budget, there was not equal funding. You could clearly see that even when you're asking for the one-to-one match, there oftentimes would have been in the history of the Tennessee legislature that Tennessee State did not receive their one-to-one match. So when I was elected in 2012, one of the first conversations I had was with the president of Tennessee State to ask, what issues are going on, and they were not receiving their match. Thankfully, because of some research that my father had done in 1970 when he was in office as a state representative, we had a blueprint to say how to approach the legislature to say, look, the funding has not been there for decades. Let's start to work to at least get the match. And we were able to finally get our full one-to-one match in 2016 going forward. But then we had to ask the question, if Tennessee State had not gotten their required match all these years, were there some issues that the campus was experiencing because of this? Because, many times the school had to then make the match themselves. They had to pull from their general funds, which represented student scholarships that had to be foregone, which represented teacher salary increases, and most importantly, represented building maintenance. So when you talk about college campuses with deferred maintenance, this primarily we found was due to them not having their state funds.
Yeah, Senator McCray, and talk about your experience in Maryland. So I think it was early last year, right? Maryland HBCUs, including 1890 land grant institutions like University of Maryland Eastern Shore, were finally able to settle a lawsuit against the state of Maryland for a significant amount of state funding, and they were able to essentially win close to $600 million in funding for HBCUs throughout the state of Maryland. This was back funding, and talk about that experience and what that's been like for Maryland HBCUs moving forward.
And I think that it's one of the most humbling, one of the most honoring opportunities, especially to be in a body that's intentional and recognize the disparities that have happened against HBCUs since forever. This has happened under Democrats and it's happened under Republicans. Let me be very, very clear in reference to that. That lawsuit had been taking place for over a decade. So over close to 15 years. You had the lawyers that stepped in to represent the respective institutions to make sure. But we had a Speaker of the House, our first Black Speaker of the House, Speaker Adrian Jones. We had a very conscious and intentional body. So our body has gotten a lot more younger, has gotten a lot more progressive, but has also gotten a lot more Blacker, and letting them know as one of the largest Black caucuses across the country that this is an important issue. And we're willing to hold up a lot of the other issues that we are debating in this General Assembly until this comes to some form of closure. As stated, what happens is $577 million gets awarded over a 10-year period to the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. Morgan State University, Bowie State University, and Coppin State University. So all of that hard work that folks before me, because I just got to the legislature 7 years ago, folks before me that were putting in the work that aren't even here anymore, that were laying that foundation for these powerful, great institutions to be able to receive what was already had. The courts had found that they were having their services duplicated. So the courts had said it, but what happens was we could not come to an agreement. Both governors took some level of executive leadership with the legislature that stepped in at that moment. And that was a very, very proud moment, not just for the state of Maryland, not just for the General Assembly, but also for our entire legislative Black caucus. And I'll close with this. One powerful moment that happened just yesterday. Morgan State University's band had came, played on the Senate floor. And we had Senator Sidnor, who was the sponsor of Senate Bill 1. It was Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 1 last year. He had talked about how many people have graduated from HBCU, how many people, siblings had went to a HBCU. He closed it with how many folks voted for SB1 and HB1, and everybody was able to stand up and move in that. And it was just such a powerful moment to see the entire legislature on one page about addressing something historically that shouldn't have happened, that we've actually hit a correction course for.
Hey, Senator. President Jones, you're not just leading Fort Valley State University in Georgia. Now you're chair of the 1890, the Council of 1890 Presidents. So you're coordinating with, you're having conversations with 1890 land grant HBCUs all over the country. And what's the demand? What's the big ask from the federal government in terms of the support, the resources that are needed to make 1890 land grant institutions whole? So we know that there was some money that was baked into the legislatively failed Build Back Better Act from, that failed in December. There are conversations about maybe breaking it up into pieces and trying to pass provisions like that $10 billion for HBCUs and also minority serving institutions. But do you know what that ballpark figure is, like that demand from the federal government to make these institutions whole?
Well, and let me just say this. First of all, let me congratulate Senator McCray and also the work of Representative Love for what they both are doing in their states. This is incredibly important to our sector. And I know that it's been a long journey for both of you. So congratulations. From a system perspective, this kind of funding, I don't know the exact dollar amount that I can give you, but what I will say is that denying these schools funding over the years has was just shared, created some real challenges, I think, for our institutions. From an infrastructure perspective, as you think about deferred maintenance, you think about the investments that we could have made in our communities. When you got 19 institutions spread out over almost every county of those states. And when that support is not there, that means that we are, in fact, not able to deliver on services that our community may be expecting of us. The ask for us, I think, is really important. This is a real significant time in our history. And I think we are, as a council, trying to do our very best to make sure we're getting in front of as many of the agency heads as possible, to make sure that they understand the importance of the investment, to follow the lead of President Biden in terms of the investments that were shared early on in his presidency. And we have to make sure we deliver. I think we are all tired of this sort of adage or tagline we use, doing more with less. We've had to do that, but at some point we need to. We're at a time now where I believe we can really move the needle, but it's going to take tremendous courage by our leaders to do just that. And there's no time better than where we are today. Industry is beginning to step up and support our efforts. And we, from the 1890 Foundation, has done a remarkable job in the very short time that they've been in existence to connecting our institutions with industry. But I think it's also important that our federal partners also connect. The return on the investment is extraordinary. And that's part of that story that we have to better tell, that why these investments are so important. We're fortunate enough, at least in our state, for example, from a state match perspective, to have received the full one-to-one match since 2011. But frankly, one-to-one is not even enough. I think that, again, when you think about the needs throughout our community, and we are in rural Georgia and support a lot of communities, we'd like to see that match go well beyond the one-to-one. When we don't, we're not able to support communities in the way that I believe that we can do. So these investments are important. We are following and monitoring various bills that are moving through the process, but there is no time like now to get this done.
Yeah,
or be a great failure, I think.
Hey, Adam, to get your thoughts too, and your reporting and the research that you've done with this book, you're kind of add to what Dr. Jones is saying about one, what's needed to make these institutions feel complete. Also, how do these institutions also for a very long time have been doing more with less, right? And then we have situations where the 1862 universities that are adequately funded, the predominantly white institutions, there are even occasions where they're receiving federal dollars to engage in all sorts of creative, innovative research projects. And then they're actually calling, and I might ask you about this a little bit later on, President Jones, but then they actually, in certain instances, at least from what I've been told, they're calling on the 1890s to help them out, the underfunded 1890s, which personally I find that a little bit infuriating, but you want to get your added thoughts to what Dr. Jones is saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that just thinking about that idea that even sometimes the one-to-one isn't enough, right? You have to think about historically, right? When the Truman Commission did its big report in the 1940s on the, effectively higher education in American democracy, but there was a significant section in there about the funding for white education and Black education, particularly the historically Black colleges versus predominantly white institutions. In a place like Kentucky, they were funding white education at a 42-to-1 ratio. Right. And that was at its most severe. In DC, at its least severe, it was at a 3-to-1 ratio. And so, you think about all of the space in there, none of the institutions were being funded equitably at that time. And so you just sort of fast forward that, and that's from, the beginning of the institutions being founded until the 1940s. And it didn't just stop in the 1940s, right? The inequitable funding continued on even in today, right? You look at a place like North Carolina A&T, when it made its jump to become a Carnegie classification 2 institution, right? A high research activity producing institution. It didn't receive any additional funding to make that move. But when two predominantly white institutions did the same thing, and they made that move in 2004. So when two predominantly white institutions did the same thing, within 2 years, they each received $10 million apiece from the state. And North Carolina A&T has gone back and said, we're fighting for this funding. They've only received 2.5 million of it to this point. And so you see sort of that sort of inequitable funding even today. And so I think there are a couple of things that can be done. Of course, the initiatives like in Maryland, as Senator McCray, and in Tennessee, as Representative Love talked about, those are incredibly important. I also see that Denise Smith is on this call from the Century Foundation, and she's proposed a multi-billion-dollar endowment from the federal government for HBCUs in order to sort of fund some of those infrastructure projects, and the way that an endowment helps you think about the future, right? You can future plan when you have something to fall back on, as opposed to sort of thinking budget to budget. I also, one of the things that I've proposed in the book is thinking about the role that some of those predominantly white institutions had in keeping Black students out for so long. The fact that they were literally fighting when there was literal bloodshed about keeping Black students out of these institutions that were being showered with funding while HBCUs were being shafted. And is there a responsibility in a place like Mississippi for a place like Ole Miss that was keeping Black students out when Alcorn State was having its funding having its funding taken. For a place like, Georgetown, which sold 272 people in order to keep its university alive and has now generated such a large endowment, what can those institutions do to aid HBCUs? That's not to say that HBCUs need these institutions to save them. It's to say that if higher education is professing to these higher ideals that it does, then it should there should be thinking of that sort of moral compass that higher education tends to profess to be, that legacy of slavery and segregation has never been adequately addressed outside of, renaming buildings or building statues on campus.
Right. Oh, also, real quick question, Adam. So, okay, North Carolina A&T, they applied for, what was that called again? What was it?
So they were, they when they moved to Carnegie 2 classification, so a high research activity producing institution.
Got it.
In 2004, I believe it was.
Two classification. That's what it's called when they want to become like a high research, or they're becoming a like high research institution. Or
they were moving up to become an R1. So R1 they're hoping to become an R1, and they're currently an R2, which is and it's the kind of like an R2 plus. So high.
Got it. Thanks for that clarification. Appreciate it. And so, Representative Love, Senator McCray, I'll start with you, Representative Love. So, we have this battle, within your states or in states like yours, where, you're seeing federal dollars that are being appropriated for these universities, but the states won't match it. Let's talk a little bit more about that fight. How do you persuade legislatures? I'll start with you, Representative Love. I mean, what are those discussions like with your colleagues, maybe even colleagues on the other side of the aisle about, hey, this is federal law. The state has to match these federal dollars. You have an obligation here. But two, these are also universities that contribute to the not just to the economy of the community around them, but they contribute to the state's economy. Sure. In terms of the jobs, in terms of the research opportunities, in terms of the graduates that stay in those states. What's that business case that you set for colleagues in a legislature like Tennessee's, just to say, hey, listen, okay, if you don't want to feel altruistic about this, this is something that you should do because it's just good for the Tennessee economy?
Well, I do want to give a nod to Brother Harris's research, but also to Senator McCray and what they did in Maryland, because that also helped us make the case that it can be done. When one state goes ahead and starts working toward making the HBCUs whole, that gives another the encouragement. The case we made was we made the case of this is a state institution. These are state buildings. And if you don't start working on repairing them now, you will eventually have to pay more. We had a committee formed, and I was blessed to be the chair of the committee that did the research on comparing the funding for our 2 HBCUs. We came back with a report that demonstrated that Tennessee State had been underfunded close to $544 million. We then went and had an outside consultant work with the state to evaluate the campus buildings of Tennessee State. That report came back and said that Tennessee State's building, their entire campus, was $337 million in disrepair. So that helped us make the case to say, now we know that the university needs $337 million minimum to get all their buildings on campus up to a level where they are safe, where they can provide adequate academic buildings for students and also residence halls. Now, state of Tennessee, this is a state campus. These are state buildings. Let's collectively now go and put this campus at the level where it can attract more students, where it can attract more faculty, where it can attract more investment. Because as President Jones knows, you cannot give a tour of your campus to a prospective faculty member if your building's in disrepair and ask them to come and teach there. You cannot give a tour to a prospective student and say, this is where you're going to be doing your research, and also this is the residence hall where you're going to be staying if they're in disrepair. So we made the case to our colleagues that this needs to happen, and that started the conversation around, to your point, how much better would the state of Tennessee be in a place to attract more students and the more faculty to come and teach here. And also, Brother Harris, Tennessee State is at an R2 position, but also we said, look, what would it be looking like if we could raise Tennessee State to an R1 status, so that now you have an R1 in East Tennessee with the land grant with UT, you have an R1 institute in West Tennessee with the University of Memphis. Wouldn't it be great to have an R1 in Middle Tennessee with Tennessee State University? So that's the case we started making.
Yeah, Senator McCray, talk about that case. So I mean, you got the nearly $600 million. That's like over $500 million in funding for HBCUs. But now, I'm sure that fight and that struggle continues. And what are those discussions like, those conversations like, persuading the state, especially dealing with, legislators and even the governor, not always on the same page with you. Sometimes there's a little bit of animus towards these types of institutions. What are those conversations like?
I got the unique opportunity to be able to sit on the budget committee in the Maryland State Senate, which pretty fortunate. And for folks that may not know, it's a $58 billion budget for the state of Maryland every year. And one of the things that we're dealing with is, and we don't hear this very often, is not just a surplus, but a structural surplus of $6 billion. And when we have that level of money from the feds coming in, from the structural surplus that's coming in, you have to be equally as intentional about this money, because this was unaccounted for, extra dollars. And how do we make sure that we continue to kind of compound and address the issues that have perpetuated the challenges within our respective institutions? So that's the discussion that's happening right now. It's easier to do that in the state of Maryland from a capital standpoint, because the governor, while he proposes a budget, we can move money around from a capital standpoint. We don't have that luxury from an operating standpoint, which is what the overhead, the 577 contributed to. So we're going to do our due diligence to make sure that the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, Coppin, Morgan, and Bowie get addressed, especially while we have a $6 billion surplus. So they'll get on top of funds.
Dr. Jones, I am curious, how do, faced with these funding pressures, how does a university like yours do so much with so less, right? And how do you innovate? How do you churn out, highly talented graduates that, also contribute quite a bit? We're starting to find out more and more as we explore HBCUs, and particularly 1890 land grants contribute quite a bit to the larger economy. But one, how are you keeping these institutions afloat? How do you also are able to conduct, the type of research that we're talking about, to get that kind of like R2, R1 classification, and innovate at a time like this, particularly when there's a high demand for workers, professionals in the innovation sector. There's a high demand for people to respond to issues, challenges like climate crisis. How do you do it?
Well, quite frankly, we don't have a choice but to do it. But what I will say is that, we are very resilient. We understand the challenges that we face. You sort of know this when you come into this environment, right? So we know the kinds of challenges that we face. But what I understood, and I'll speak, just from my own experience coming in 6 years ago to the university, I knew that we had to begin to raise the bar and start to think beyond where we were. At times we often will make excuses or say, well, that's just how we do it here, or how we do it as HBCUs. I think we have to raise the bar of excellence for each other, for our institution, for our students. And we have worked, I think, very hard, a great deal of advocacy that we have to do. We have to work more collaboratively with those in and outside of the campus. But it's been a challenge, but we have some incredibly hardworking people. I'll say this, what's remarkable to me, and was probably the biggest aha moment for me coming here, having not worked in an HBCU environment before. But I think it speaks to how we have gotten a lot of this work done. It's tremendous commitment by the individuals that are here. We have, when we had a reduction in the budget a year ago, one of the things we did was to offer an early retirement program, one that we thought many of our employees would take advantage of. We just knew that was going to occur. We have a number of faculty and staff that are, let's just say, 60 plus. And quite frankly, it was unsuccessful in the sense that people are committed to this institution and to this work. And I think that's how we've been able to get it done. Now, I wasn't disappointed. I was just perplexed by thinking if you incentivize, we might be able to move some through the process and maybe bring on some younger talent and grow the institution in that way. But what I learned was this is their work, and they want to give back in ways that I had not seen at other institutions that I've worked with. So I think I'm amazed at the work that our community continues to do. 4 years of really no raises for our staff and faculty, but they keep showing up, and they're committed to helping these students get to places that maybe they've never even dreamed of. So it's great work and great people that make this work happen.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. And so if folks have questions, and I know, and I may pose one of these questions from the audience to Senator McCray before he leaves. He's going to leave out very shortly in about several minutes. But we're going to open up the floor for questions in the Zoom chat feature here during this discussion. If anyone in the audience who's listening in right now has a question, feel free to pose it just by using the chat feature here in Zoom. We do have a question from Thanise Taylor-Bowden. Dr. Thanise Taylor-Bowden, who's asking if lawsuits are the way to go when the one-to-one match isn't being met. Senator McCray, it sounds like it worked out in Maryland.
I think that there's definitely an opportunity to put pressure on folks to make the right decisions. I think that you also had the legislature to kind of apply pressure. You then had the institutions themselves. So it was a number of issues. And as stated, that this was a lawsuit that was going on for over 10 years. I want to say about 12 to 14 years to be exact. So it didn't just happen. Folks don't always understand the foundational work that comes towards success because they see that immediate success. But yes, I do believe that the lawsuit was one of the components. The op-eds, making sure that we educate our people in reference to why this is important, making sure that they had a number of rallies in front of Annapolis, the state capital, around the HBCU issues and getting the Divine Nine engaged and involved and so many other folks. But I do think that is one of the components on top of a lot of other things to help it matriculate up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks so much, Senator McCray. Your thoughts on that too, Representative Love. So not quite there yet in Tennessee, but probably getting to that point.
No. So we have $330 million in the budget this year to repair the campus. And to that point, we had the discussion about whether a lawsuit was the best route to go. And we were able to leverage what happened in Maryland to say, yes, they had a lawsuit, and that helped us kind of put some other pressure on to say, listen, if we just work this out, one thing, we don't want to have to go through a 10-year process. But number two, we'd like to go ahead and work on a solution today. And so we were, overwhelmingly surprised and pleased that the governor put in the budget $330 million. Well, I'm sorry, $318 million for Tennessee State, $250 million for structural improvements, and $60 million for a new engineering building. So we had those options, and we kept telling our alumni, at this point, no one has said, no, you can't do this. No one from the governor's office was saying, we're not going to address this. We're not going to accept this as a viable option. No one was saying to us, your numbers aren't correct. And so that gave us the leverage. And that's why I want to keep tipping my hat to Maryland, because I think it was their work, right, that made others see that now, if you go the lawsuit route, this could end up to be a situation where you end up paying more. So if you go ahead and work on this now, it's going to be a faster option.
Got it. Real quick question for you both, Representative Love and also Senator McCray, before you jump off, Senator McCray. I'm just wondering about what the level of coordination could be like, or what you envision it to potentially be with Congressional Black Caucus members, so they're fighting that fight in terms of making sure that that money. It's been a very tense fight, trying to ensure that there's federal money in legislation like Build Back Better. Because at one point, the Biden administration had they had actually proposed $90 billion at the top. Then it came down to 3. then we got 10, right? And that's not even just exclusively for HBCUs. You got to share that with other MSIs or minority serving institutions. So what should that level of coordination, do you see much coordination between like Black state legislators and Black congressional members or people in Congress and in state legislatures about these schools and trying to make sure that federal state funding match is occurring? Senator McCray?
I think the coordination is very important. And we have 2 congressional Black members, Kwesi Mfume from the 7th Congressional District and Anthony Brown from the 4th Congressional Districts, which we talk to all the time in reference to a number of issues. And I would just say that I think that it's got the federal, the state, and the local jurisdictions. We got some very big city mayors. My mayor is Brandon Scott. Like it have to have all of our voices collectively coming together because these inequities have been happening decades on top of decades on top of decades. And that's the only way we're going to do this collectively, not one single shot off. We all have to work collectively together, similar to what's happening right now with this panel discussion.
We've been talking with Maryland State Senator Corey McCray, represents the district where there is a HBCU representing the state, where there is an 1890 land grant institution, University of Maryland Eastern Shore, representing parts of Baltimore. Thanks so much, Senator McCray. Really appreciate your time. And we'll see. We'll be in touch. We'll see you soon. Continue to have questions flow in the chat feature in our Zoom virtual room right now. Representative Love, I want to get your thoughts on that. Like, what do you think and then Adam, I'm going to come to you on that question. What do you think that level of coordination should be like between federal and state legislators?
I will add that I think that there has to be coordination also with alumni from our institutions, because many of the alumni lived through these inequities, right? They lived through staying in a residence hall that was not properly maintained. They lived through going to these classrooms and dealing with these situations. And so alum are very anxious, right, to see this being taken care of. And I think also the conversation with alums helps them now understand why the things were the way they were. You're the president of university, and a student is trying to figure out why you don't have the proper equipment, and they think it's just that no one is doing right by the students. But oftentimes, because of the underfunding, the campus is just not in the place that it can be. And so I think the coordination needs to be at a level where you have congressional members and you have state legislators, you have alumni, and you have current students, because these current students will be the ones who benefit from the work of those who are invested to make sure the campus is in the proper place. And I think there's a wonderful opportunity to make sure that the federal legislators know we're working on the state level, and that the state level doesn't do anything that oversteps our bounds with what the federal government is trying to do. And I'll say this also, there's never going to be too much work to be handled. There's enough work to go around for everybody to say, what's it look like for us to come together and work on this? And if I can real quick, I would encourage everybody who's thinking about finding out what they can do. Contact your president at university, contact your legislator that represents that school, and offer your support and get behind the president, though, right? And take guidance from the president, because they're the ones going to have to be trying to coordinate this effort.
Mm-hmm. Adam, I want you to give your thoughts on that too, like with that level of coordination, what that's been like historically, what you've seen, especially in your research and reporting, where you think it should be.
Well, yeah, I think that coordination is incredibly important. And actually, one of the things that Representative Love said actually reminded me of just, when people think of like why things are the way they are and thinking about the laboratory equipment, actually in 1979, when the Department of Education, the old Department of Health, Education, and Welfare was really kind of digging in to look at states and say that, are you funding your institutions equitably? Are you, providing for these historically Black institutions? They went down to North Carolina again, and the civil rights lead at the department was effectively looking at the autoclaves, right? These sort of high pressure cookers that they use to clean the laboratory equipment. And he wanted to compare the autoclaves at North Carolina State University to those at North Carolina Central and North Carolina A&T. North Carolina State had 40 of these devices, where between North Carolina A&T and North Carolina Central, they had 3. And he was like, just thinking about all of the funding inequities that had gone into making that inequity so glaring. He was like, all you have to do is go to the laboratories and look at what this one has compared to what this one has. But I think that the other thing historically is that, we have these moments of really intense pressure, really intense investigation from the federal government, effort from the federal government, effort from states government. But there needs to be a continuity, because right after Titel went down there, David Titel, who was the civil rights lead of the department at the time, after he went down there, the Reagan administration came in. And within, I think, 2 years, the state of North Carolina had filed a lawsuit, and the federal government settled with them. And there was a quote in the Washington Post from the early 80s where Titel, who had gone down and looked at the autoclave, says, this doesn't read like a settlement. This reads like a joint agreement between the state of North Carolina and the Department of Education of everything that they've done wrong. Historically. And so I think that there has to be that continuity, right? It can't just be a thing that flares up in one moment and then sort of goes by the wayside. And that's a continual pressure thing. That is a thing that is, coming from state lawmakers, coming from, as Representative Love said, coming from alumni, coming from the institutional leaders, to sort of keep that pressure on to ensure that it's not something that goes by.
Also, I wanted to have join us for this discussion while we have a little bit of time left, the president, CEO of the 1890 Universities Foundation, Dr. Mortimer Newthville, who is in Washington, D.C. And is busily and very engaged in that battle for more resources, more federal funding, especially for these institutions. Mort, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. And we'd love to get your insights on that question too, about like the need for that coordination, because you've got to coordinate or rally 1890 universities themselves and the presidents. But, you've also got your ear to the ground on Capitol Hill and what that conversation is like, what that lobbying and that advocacy is like. Talk about how important that is.
Thank you, Charles, for your leadership in this conversation. And thanks to my board chair for really guiding us through the process, and to our 3 speakers for their excellent presentation. And in response to your question, Charles, I think working through the processes in Washington are rather critical. I must, however, comment on the case for working in the state legislatures. The Maryland case in particular, when this all started, the ask was about $2 billion, and this worked down to 600 plus million. And we have to be careful sometimes how quickly we accept these negotiations. And what I found missing from that conversation was the importance of the matching funds for the land grant programs. It's important. I think all aspects of our universities need support. But one of the cases that we are fighting is adequate funding for matching programs, because the land grant 1862 universities are sometimes matched 5, 6, 7 to 1, while our 1890s are matched less than 1 to 1. So in these negotiations, we need to be sure that we're asking for support of the total campus, but do not forget the matching piece that is missing when the final numbers are negotiated.
No, it's very important. Thank you for that, Mort, too. And, just real quick, Mort, before I go on to Dr. Jones, because there was a specific question we have from the audience for Dr. Jones. What's the next step you think for the foundation, especially as you're observing 5 years?
5 years from now, we have really come a long way, and we have accomplished a lot in 5 years. A couple of the issues that we're pushing, the centers of excellence, and formalizing linkages with the private sector. We cannot always depend on the federal government for their support. So the private sector is a critical part of what we do. And as we move ahead, we hope that we can use the federal funds as a catalyst for getting industry support to undertake some of our activities. When you look at the industry relationships with the 1862 universities, it's tremendous, but it's really lacking within our 1890 community. So that's one of the partnerships we are forging now. And thanks to a couple of industries in particular for their leadership in helping us to build our infrastructure. As a foundation, Charles, I must mention that when I look at other foundations, they have a staff capacity and an infrastructure that's really tremendous. We started with 2 half-time individuals. Now we're up to a staff of 3 full-time and a couple of part-time people. And my goal is to expand this to where we can become functional and where we can become recognizable as other foundations in Washington, representing the 1890 universities and our other partnerships.
We did have a question from Dr. Alton Thompson, President Jones, and he's in our audience. And he's asking, how do you think the 1890 U.S. Department of Agriculture Task Force can help in the effort for equity in state matching funds?
Well, tonight, that's important. And one of the things that we need to move forward with getting that task force active again. I think what it helps is it allows us a seat at the table, if you will, and having ongoing conversations with the secretary and other agency heads. So it's important for us to continue to push. I think we're having some excellent conversations right now with many in their leadership to find ways to enhance the work that we're trying to do for our institution. So that task force is just one of the vehicles for that. But please know that we're pushing hard to have much more coordinated efforts across USDA and beyond.
Also, there was a question, we had that from Debbie Ann Page. At some point, I wanted to join in on the discussion while and please still, if audience participants, folks who are watching in now, if you have a question, while we still have a little bit of time left with our panel with this great discussion about, the future, the fate of institutions like 1890 land grant, HBCUs, and trying to answer that and address that funding question, that state funding question especially, please feel free to leave a question or comment in the chat feature here in Zoom. And so wondering, I can throw this out here to you also, Representative Love, it applies to you. What organizations like Council on Communities of Color at the Council of State Governments, which, just until recently started kind of forming a better relationship with Black state legislators. And then you have like the National Black Caucus of State Legislators. But how can those organizations help in that, and kind of coalescing Black state legislators around these kinds of issues?
So I think for me, one thing that needs to be pointed out that really helped us in Tennessee was the fact that we were able to actually go back and find the 1913 law that the Tennessee legislature used to tell the federal government what percentages they wanted to have the land grant money sent down to Tennessee in. That was key because it allowed us to then say, here is where we have seen that from the very beginning, law was used to say that Tennessee State's money is going to be sent to the state treasurer first. UT's money goes to UT automatically. And that allowed us to start to build the case there. The reason I lift it up is because these organizations need to be in touch with state legislators who have access to those libraries and those budget books. They need to be talking to them about how they can then coordinate the effort to say, can you go and research all the state laws that pertain to the funding of our 1890 institution, because it's supposed to be coordination between the state and the federal government at the very beginning, because the federal government has always said, Tennessee, Maryland, Alabama, Florida, you tell us how you want us to send the federal money down there to you, or how you want to divide it, what's the percent? And Dr. Jones lifted up earlier that oftentimes what you have is the other institutions are getting funded at more than a 1-to-1 match. And so the disparity continues to grow because they may be getting a 5-to-1 or a 10-to-1 match. And so you need to have conversation with a legislator who can then go and get those historical documents in those legislative libraries. That's what helped us in Tennessee. I had access to our archives of budget books going back just even to 1950 in actual books, not talking about the ones on microfiche and microfilm. These are actual the books. And that helped us to be able to say, hold on, Tennessee State is not even in the budget book when it comes to land grant money. You're not even listing Tennessee State in the budget book. So that gave us, again, the case to build. And that's why you have to have these other organizations coordinate with the state legislator who can then go and access those books.
Yeah. Speaking of which, too, Adam, I want to get your thoughts on this. And also, Dr. Newfield, we're going to keep you on for a few more minutes. Dr. Jones, I'll get to you as well. I wonder, too, as part of this relationship or forming this relationship, a better workable relationship with state governments, it's also maybe kind of using the HBCUs in those states, particularly institutions, 1890 land grant institutions in those states, like Tennessee State University, for example, and Representative Love states he's a TSU graduate, using them as incubators for talent to go into state governments, to be working as public officials or as professionals within these state governments. I guess that helps too. That is a strategy, correct? And we've seen that over the years, because we're seeing, like Representative Love and others, members of Congress, other state legislators, local elected officials, people who are putting constant pressure on their legislatures, on their governing bodies to finally resource and fund these institutions the way they need to be.
Yeah, I think that, even thinking about Alabama A&M, right? There have been several folks who have come through Alabama A&M, gone into the state legislature, and the lieutenant governor of Wisconsin right now is an Alabama A&M graduate. And so, just thinking about what the institutions are producing, right? They have the sort of students that they are sending to these really sort of prominent positions. And even if you think about folks like Representative Alma Adams, right, where she is really pushing on Capitol Hill for, and has been pushing on Capitol Hill for HBCU funding for a long time. But it sort of grows out of that relationship to the institutions and sort of knowing the plight of the institutions. And I think it's a very important thing. Or the motto that we had at A&M was start here, go anywhere. And I think that anywhere piece, it should apply to sort of coming back to the institution and helping. I mean, my book actually opens with the experience that I had at A&M, right, where I was I needed to go to the library to get some studying done, but the library closed 3 hours earlier, in part because of it wasn't going to have the staff that it needed to stay open for that period of time. But the institution across not too far away, University of Alabama at Huntsville, predominantly white institution, their library was open 3 hours longer than ours. And that was the first time that I had ever been over to UAH. And, you end up learning that UAH has an endowment that is, nearly $30 million more than A&M's, and yet they've been open 75 years less than A&M, which is a land grant institution. And so, knowing that was sort of the genesis of my interest in examining these issues, I imagine that for a lot of other students and alumni, it could be very well be the same.
Joe, some parting thoughts, Dr. Newville, also Dr. Jones. How do you plan for the future? Particularly, Dr. Newfield, I'll start with you, and then we'll end it or close it with Dr. Jones. But Dr. Newfield, how do we plan for 1890 HBCUs for their collective future while still grappling with this federal state matching fund issue? Oh, got you on mute.
Yep.
There we go.
let me indicate that we're going to have to adapt to a new way of doing business. And I must say that I had a little difficulty getting on this morning because of my technology skills. And so you can imagine the communities that we work with, they're disadvantaged with broadband technology. And I was really hoping that Build Back Better would be an avenue for us to get the resources we need to move forward. So as we move to 2022, 23 and beyond, we have to look how we address the digital divide and how our communities that we serve will again be left behind. We are trying our best to attract the best of the best, if you will, but there are also those students who will continue to be left behind if we are not there for them.
That's right.
So how do we get the technology to them so that if, in case there's another pandemic, how do we reach them and serve them where they are and when they're available? And let's not forget, we are still dealing with with communities that have to work while in school, and therefore we have to reach them when they're available. So there are many challenges for us as we proceed or we progress, knowing that the audiences that we're serving will again be left behind, both in terms of education, healthcare, and economic survival. So we have a task ahead of us through our extension, research, and our academic programs activities. Let me also, Charles,
sure, go ahead.
In closing out my remarks,
Absolutely.
thank Adam and let him know that we're going to be using his book as we move ahead with our celebration for this 5th anniversary. And thanks for your publication.
Yes, thank you very much for that too, Adam, for facilitating that. And Dr. Jones, parting thoughts on that too, the future of an 1890 institution like yours, and how you continue to grapple with this serious funding issue and the issues, the other challenges, other areas that you need to address. You need to, as Mort said, you need to adapt to.
Yeah, I think, again, I said earlier, the pandemic has taught us a lot, and our readiness for change, our willingness to adapt, and really get out front of, there will be another pandemic. We don't know what that pandemic may be, but there will be something else that we will face. And the question is how will we respond as a system? I think what we have done over these last few years is important for us as we think about our future as an 1890 system. And that is that we need to continue to build our system, to work as a system. We are so much stronger as a system than we are individually as institutions. And that's something that we have learned and we have leveraged as we have been working with industry. And I think the past chair said it best. We are the solution that many of these industry partners that they've been looking for. And so many of the issues that Mort has so eloquently brought up are issues that we can address as a system. So we're very hopeful that we continue to work together in terms of our collaboration, how we engage, working with not only federal partners, but industry partners and with each other as campuses. So I think our future is very bright, but we must work together as a system in order to accelerate the change that we all want to see.
Hey, thank you so much. That was Dr. Paul Jones. He is president, Fort Valley State University in Georgia, and he's also chair of the Council of 1890 Presidents, giving us some parting thoughts for the panel. Then we heard from Dr. Mortimer Newfield, who is president and CEO of the 1890 Universities Foundation, who left also. Thank you so much, Mortimer, for coming in and giving us your expertise and giving us some perspective on what you're up against. Also want to thank Senator Corey McCray, representing district in Baltimore and Maryland, and also talking about the plight of HBCUs in Maryland, particularly 1890 University of Maryland, Eastern Shore. Representative Harold Love from Tennessee, represents parts of Nashville, including the district where we have Tennessee State University. Thank you so much, Representative, for your time. Always a pleasure talking with you. And Adam Harris is the author of The State Must Provide. And really do appreciate your time, Adam, and also appreciate your work in the Atlantic as well. Thanks so much, everyone. And now, before we close, real quick, I did want to get a few words from Debbie Ann Page. She is the director. She's the founding director of the Council on Communities of Color at the Council of State Governments Eastern Regional Conference. There are a few 1890 universities in that conference. And, just to kind of describe real quick, what is the Council on Communities of Color? We've been hearing a lot about the CCC these past couple of years during pandemic. You've been doing quite a bit, but thanks so much for making this possible, Debbie.
Thank you for having me, Charles. So thank you for the introduction as well. So the CCC is CSG's only self-identified member committee, and we provide a forum for state decision makers to kind of examine the unique challenges that face communities of color. So we're based in CSG's Eastern region. That's Maine to Maryland, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and 5 Eastern Canadian provinces. And we explore a wide range of issues that really is intended to just promote, improve sustainable policy outcomes through state government for the communities of the communities of color that we live in. But I'd also like to take the time now to say, I have what they call HBCU envy. And so, because I did not go to an HBCU, although I wanted to. And in that, I'd like to invite the 1890s Foundation to see if we can collaborate somehow on a project to kind of continue this conversation about exploring federal and state funding issues. And maybe we can even create some kind of scorecard or do something tangible that we can provide our members with during our annual meeting that's coming up in New Hampshire this August during our session on equitable governance.
Yeah, these are fantastic sessions. I'm hoping that we can perhaps maybe even try to figure out how to get Representative Love there, Senator McCray, Adam. You'd benefit from this greatly too. And I say this as someone who's worked with the Council on Communities of Color for a number of years, and as a senior fellow for the Council of Communities of Color at CSG. We had a wonderful discussion, in fact, about equitable governance this past December in Santa Fe, New Mexico at the Council of State Governments National Summit. So we're continuing those discussions, and we're expanding our reach and our impact, especially through the annual meetings that we have with CSG East. And it's always great to get a little bit of international perspective from our folks in Canada, and also not necessarily international, but also to get perspective from folks in places like the Virgin Islands, which I want to always give a shout out because my wife's from there, and Puerto Rico as well. So definitely looking forward to that. Real quick, since I really wanted people to see this video, so we're going to end this. Debbie, while we all close out, Debbie, if you can play that video, are you able to do that? Because the audio on my end was not good for some reason. It wasn't happening. So I'm wondering if the audio is good. If you can share that with everyone, and then we're ending this officially. This panel on we're discussing partnerships between state governments and 1890 land grant institutions. I'm Charles Ellison. I am typically the host, executive producer, creator of a daily public affairs program known as Reality Check on WURD. I'm at Ellis Report on Twitter.com. Don't forget to learn more about the 1890 Foundation at 1890foundation.org. And follow us, please, on Twitter at 1890 Foundation. That's simple. At 1890 Foundation is always information there every day. And you can also sign up for our newsletter. Go to 1890foundation.org and just click on news. And we have a regular newsletter through Substack that's there. And you can get all sorts of great information, keep up to speed on what's happening with these fantastic institutions. So thanks for joining us for this discussion. I want to thank our panelists. Really appreciate it. And so we'll close out. Just watch this wonderful video, these 5th anniversary shout outs from our 1890 presidents. If you could, Debbie, please.
Can you hear?
I'm Mort Newville, President and CEO of the 1890 Universities Foundation. On behalf of our Board of Directors, our 19 universities, and the communities we serve, I welcome you to Mission Forward, a celebration of the Foundation's 5-year anniversary. I am pleased you could attend today's virtual event, which shines a light on how partnerships, public policy, outreach, extension, and research are moving the 1890 University's mission forward. I hope that after hearing today's discussion, you will be inspired to come on board as a partner or expand an existing collaboration or advocate for the equitable funding resources needed to continue the historic legacy of our 1890 land-grant universities. Speaking of our historic universities and our partners, I am proud to have a group of our 1890 presidents and corporate partners celebrating with us.
Congratulations, Dr. Mort Newville and the 1890 Foundation on your 5-year anniversary and for 5 years of excellence. Since the establishment of the foundation, you have significantly enhanced funding opportunities with industry partners to benefit our 1890 system. You've helped rebrand our system, 19 strong, and you've helped launch our 4 centers of excellence. We look forward to what the next 5 years and beyond brings to our great 1890 system. Again, congratulations.
I want to congratulate the 1890 Foundation for an outstanding 5 years. You know, for me, 1890s is everything because I was raised on an 1890 university. That's Tennessee State University. Well, my father was president of Tennessee State University from 1975 to 1985. So I'm familiar with the Centers for Excellence, the agricultural extension programs, all the good work that they're doing on sustainability, the 110,000 students of the 19 programs or 19 institutions and universities that are part of the 1890. 1890 universities and the 1890 Foundation, thank you for all that you do. You all rock and make a difference for this country and for the many students that are graduates of the 1890 universities.
I want to congratulate Mort Newville and the 1890s Foundation on its 5-year anniversary. It's really incredible to have built the organization from the ground up, continuing to spearhead efforts to get us more federal funds, working hard to get us private funds, and starting our centers of excellence. Congratulations on 5 years.
Greetings. I am Felicia M. Day, the 20th president of Alcorn State University. Alcorn was founded in 1871 as the first public land-grant HBCU in the nation. I want to congratulate the 1890 Foundation on its 5th anniversary. Also, I want to thank the Foundation for its advocacy on behalf of our 1890 universities.
Hello, I'm Irvin Young, Vice President of People for Club Support at Sam's Club. And I want to congratulate the 1890 Foundation on their 5-year anniversary. It's exciting to see the work that you're doing to ensure HBCU students are successful in their education and careers. You know, at Walmart, we deeply believe in the value of diverse talent and strive to create equitable opportunities for them. And you are all doing a great job in ensuring your institutions continue their commitment to student success.
I'm Kirsty Sims, Senior Director for Walmart.org Center for Racial Equity. We are excited to support the 1890 Foundation and the work you're doing to deepen expertise and promote education in Black communities. Cheers to 5 years.
I'm Patty Konstantakis, Director for Walmart.org's Center for Racial Equity. It has been a pleasure to partner with you and see your positive impact on the students, faculty, and communities served by the 1890 institutions. Keep up the great work, and happy 5th anniversary, 1890 Foundation.
Greetings, I'm Lawrence Alexander, Chancellor of the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, an 1890 land-grant university. I'd like to congratulate the 1890 University Foundation on its 5-year anniversary Thanks to President Newfield, President Jones, and the leadership team in the 1890 community for their hard work in raising public and private funds and establishing the Centers of Excellence. After 5 successful years together, we are 19 strong.
Wow, 5 years. It seems like only yesterday that the 1890s Foundation came to be. And thank goodness it did. I don't know where we would be without it, and the great support of the Foundation staff, the insightful leadership of the Board of Directors, the Council of the 1890 Presidents, and all of the related associations and councils. On behalf of North Carolina State University, congratulations on 5 fantastic years. Here's to 50 more.
Greetings, my name is Daniel K. Williams, and I'm proud to serve as the 12th president of Alabama Agricultural and Mechanical University. Congratulations to our 1890 Universities Foundation on your 5-year anniversary. Thank you for operating as a coordinating entity, working on behalf of our 19 strong 1890 universities to strategically pursue and leverage resources to support collaborative, high-impact programs at 1890 land-grant universities.
Microsoft Philanthropies is proud to stand together with the 1890 Foundation leadership, HBCU presidents, and the communities you serve in celebration of your 5-year anniversary. Thank you for your unwavering commitment to building economic prosperity for those furthest from the opportunities afforded by the digital economy. It's a pleasure to count on you as a partner.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jack Thomas, the 9th president of Central State University in Wilberforce, Ohio, and we are a proud 1890 land-grant institution. I would like to take a moment to congratulate the 1890 University Foundation on your 5th year anniversary. You have advocated, mobilized, and built partnerships that have been tremendously beneficial to all of us. Central State University is proud to be a part of the 19 Strong, and thank you for 5 years of impactful leadership. Congratulations.
Hello, I'm Eric Cage, interim president of West Virginia State University. As a proud 1890 land-grant university, we are thankful for the work that the foundation has done to support us and our sister institutions in securing increased federal funding. We congratulate the 1890 Foundation on its 5-year anniversary and look forward to continuing to work together for many years to come. Congratulations.
Congratulations and happy 5th anniversary to the 1890 Universities Foundation from the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. I am Dr. Heidi Anderson, the 16th president of the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. Foundation, in just a short period of time, you have established yourself as a driving force among the 19 1890 universities. As a result, you have encouraged strong collaborations in our mission areas of education, research, and outreach. And because of your leadership, we can truly say the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Especially the implementation and early successes of the 4 1890 Centers of Excellence. And I also want to applaud the Excite program, which addresses vaccine hesitancy during, not after, the current critical health crisis in our country. Most importantly, I am thrilled about the 1890 Scholarship Program, which will leverage the work of the 1890 institutions to contribute to a highly skilled agricultural and food workforce for years to come. Thank you for creating transformative pathways toward a brighter future for 1890s. Because of you, we are 19 strong.
All right, thank Thanks for doing that, Debbie. Really appreciate that. Thank you, everyone, for staying with us for that final video. That's our 5th year anniversary shout out video to the 1890 University's video as it celebrates its 5th anniversary, its 5th birthday. So looking for 5 more and more years to come. Just waiting for and anticipating some wonderful, some continuous wonderful things and talent out of these institutions. Once again, thank you for joining us for this conversation. We'll have many more in the future. I did see that some of the registrants, some of the audience demanding more. So this will be back. This discussion and many more will be back by popular demand. I'm Charles Ellison. You can catch me on WURD Radio every Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Just go to wordradio.com. Anywhere in the country, you can listen to the live stream. We talk about politics and public policy all day, every day. We have discussions like these. In fact, there was an interview with Dr. Mortimer Newville and also Dr. Walter Hill that aired yesterday about the origins of the foundation and getting a little bit into the history of these institutions. And so I'm also, we just launched a new magazine too, Eco Word Magazine, which airs on Fridays at 10 a.m. So just go to wordradio.com. Black Talk Radio based in Philadelphia, but we reach nationally as well. At 1890 Foundation, once again, we're also at the hashtag We Are 19 Strong. We Are 19 Strong. Use that as a hashtag. Spread the good word about the 1890 land grant institutions and demand more support from your policymakers for them. All right. So we're going to go ahead and give you the rest of your day. Back to you. Please have a great weekend. Thanks for joining us. Take care. Be safe out there.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.